we will start with a discussion on what really matters a lot to Bulgaria and to the countries in our region, and it is, what's our role? How do we enhance our role of the region, of the individual economies in countries in the EU green agenda, in this transition to a net zero competitive economy, to which we have a lot to contribute, but also certain specifics to take into consideration. We'll have an hour and a half before we break for welcoming Prime Minister Mitsotakis and President Radev at around noon, who join us for another interesting session. I want to introduce our panelists, although they probably don't need much introduction in this crowd. But to my very right, I've got Alexandra-Maria Bocse, who is the State Advisor at the Department of Climate and Sustainability to the President of Romania. Anna Maria, welcome. Does that work? Okay. This one's switched on as well, yeah? Good. Fantastic.
Good morning, good morning.
Good morning, Maria. Anna Maria. Alexandra-Maria, sorry. Next, we're expecting Tsvetelina Kuzmanova, who will probably join us a little later. Next to Alexandra-Maria is Dr. Dione Yalçın of CMS Partners. Dr. Yalçın is a managing partner for Turkey and partner for Austria. She's a member of the sustainable leadership of CMS, and business leader who needs no introduction. Dimitar Tsorkov is with us. He is the chairman of the supervisory board of one of the leading copper and industrial conglomerates in Bulgaria, Azerbaijan. Dimitar, welcome to this panel. So I will join you, not to be speaking from here, given that we have the luxury and the compact setting for this session. Yesterday we heard quite a bit, not only at the Bulgarian pavilion but everywhere, that there are two very major sides of the discussion during this COP, being the COP putting at the top of the agenda the financial aspects of our climate action. On one side, it's research, it's technology, it's innovation, it's education. But on the other side is making the transition sustainable for the sake of achieving a successful transition. So many things to be taken into consideration. And of course, we also see that, there are specifics. What will be particularly important and relevant to the Southeastern Europe and Central and Eastern Europe as a region may differ from even a neighboring region for a variety of reasons, very often even related to the condition of the climate as well as the business climate. So getting together the political will on one side, the science and innovation on the other side, and that this longer term view, that's what President Radev stressed yesterday in his remark when opening the panel. How do we do that? How do we find our role, not just in terms of recipients but also contributors, a region which is very rich in potential, contributing to the growth of the economy of the European region as a whole, fast-growing region, but also a region which needs to find its own just transition path forward in order to be a contributing region and in order to have an enhanced role. So Alexandra-Maria, if I can start with you. Bulgaria and Romania have come a long way since joining the European Union and acceding now to be fully integrated in all institutional aspects and frameworks. Bulgaria is readily preparing for introducing the euro as its own currency as well. How do you see the specific aspects of our region, and particularly the development of the Bulgarian and the Romanian economy quite closely link together major trade partners in order to accelerate this green transition process in our countries, but also be contributing partners Europe-wide.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Is this working? Yes. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here today. And let me start by congratulating Bulgaria for having this pavilion and for also creating a space where we can come together as representatives of our region at this global event. Because I think in particular in this geopolitical context, every little helps. Everything that we can do at the national level, at the regional level, working together, is taking us closer to our global objectives. Climate change and the impact of climate change goes across national borders. But what we do nationally, what we do regionally, it's also very important. And I've been at the COP right now for 2 days, and sometimes it's a bit difficult to find your way here in this global context. And I think it's very important that we have this kind of spaces and this kind of events where we can reflect on our region and what we can do better to get closer to the global goal that we are here at this COP to achieve. In terms of our region and how we can work together, I think as we move and as we walk the path of the energy transition, a lot of focus at the national level when it comes to decarbonizing the energy systems in Romania, and I believe that's similar also in Bulgaria and in Greece, has been on developing projects, deploying green tech. But I believe we need to actually look closer also in the light of the Draghi report on how we can work together to develop, to produce, to manufacture the green tech that we are going to employ in our region. And as you might know, Romania has actually recently notified to the European Commission in October our new National Energy and Climate Plan. We have committed to a target of 38% renewables in our gross final energy consumption by 2030. And we are planning to do that by resorting to wind, to solar, to heat pumps. Well, all these technologies will be technologies that if we don't move on the manufacturing side, we are going to import them. So it's going to be Romanian money, Bulgarian money, basically flying out of our countries. And I think a real partnership, not only on because we have done in the past, we are cooperating, for instance, on regulation for wind or solar. We are deploying and developing these projects. We have prosumers in our region that are more and more interested. But having a regional partnership also on becoming more relevant in global value chains when it comes to green tech.
Alexandra, you mentioned regulation, which is crucially important, particularly given the fact that now it's quite topical that frameworks in many areas of industrial and social development. And that was at the very center of Draghi's report, that one of the barriers we have to overcome in order to achieve competitive European economy for the 21st century, it is indeed to make this partnership a working partnership by finding the right balance between consolidation as well as local specifics. Vis-a-vis regulation, how can we do that in an achievable way? How can we do that more quickly so we actually don't work each separately, but address a global challenge with clear regional specifics, at least regionally, rather than at national level?
So I believe in the European Union, we do have, a framework when it comes to environmental regulation that we, for instance, that we have to fit into when we develop our energy projects. And I'm sure this is the case also in Bulgaria, and it's the case also in Romania. Sometimes when we want to develop solar projects, wind projects, hydro projects, we do have to comply with the EU regulation. Now, I think when it comes to cross-border projects that we might want to develop in offshore wind, in hydropower, having the transposition of the European regulation done properly in Romania and Bulgaria, for instance, or in the countries in the region would help, because that means that these projects would have to comply with similar rules in different countries, and that would help with the process. Now, as far as the national level is concerned, it has been recommended also as part of Repower EU to basically move towards a system where we establish the go-to areas for renewable energy projects or low-carbon energy projects, where we can have a process of faster permitting to identify areas maybe that don't have that much biodiversity value, and where it would be easier to comply with the EU directives and also have the projects. So I'm a great believer in this system of go-to areas, because we know that for energy projects, we need to have a few conditions, right? I mean, ideally, we would like to have them close to our consumers. In Romania, we have a situation where a lot of our nuclear energy and potential for renewable energy is concentrated in southeast Romania, and we have a lot of consumers in western Romania. But in addition to proximity to consumers, we also need to have the ability to have the transmission, transport lines, high voltage power lines, and also we need to make sure that we don't have a lot of environmental regulations to comply with, so we can access actually speedier processes for environmental regulation. And a system of go-to areas would allow us somehow to detect the most suitable places for renewable energy projects.
I find particularly valuable that you're bringing on board the topic about the cross-border projects and the demand side for climate finance or finance for climate action. That was, you know, very much at the core of the statement by Jürgen Richtering yesterday, the first VP of EBRD. And it is becoming more and more topical, this coordination, particularly vis-a-vis connecting infrastructure. So topical for our region, all the way to the Baltic Sea, really. May I use the opportunity now also to introduce Tsvetelina Kuzmanova, who is already with us. Tsvetelina, why don't you take your seat on the panel? Tsvetelina is the Senior Project Manager at the Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership. You do a lot of excellent analytical work, giving us context of you know, where we are and where we could be going, in a way in achieving more competitiveness rather than the other way around, for the sake of competitiveness on our green transition way. Take us through it, you know, how from your perspective you see the core strengths of the region and its potential to contribute to the climate action of Europe as such.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yes. So yeah, I work with the Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership, which is part of the University of Cambridge, but we also do work a lot with different businesses and convene some of the more progressive, both on the corporate side and financial institutions as well. So I do get to work a lot with businesses, and as has been reiterated many times here in the panel and yesterday in the pavilion as well by the other participants, competitiveness is the name of the game now. So we need to think about the businesses and European competitiveness and the businesses within our countries and within our region. One narrative that I really dislike is that we are the laggards in Europe. Our region is more lagging behind, both in terms of green policies, but not only, both economically and on other factors. So I really want, I will walk you through some of the indicators and what constitutes competitiveness in our measurements. But I would really like to also really turn to the opportunities and some of the benefits that the businesses in our region represent. And with that, to go to a little bit grimmer side of the story, when we look at our region, Central and Eastern Europe, also with Southern Europe, these are the most vulnerable to the climate change areas and the regions in Europe. And Bulgaria and Romania, in fact, are some of the most vulnerable when it comes also in a combination with the insurance protection for such climate disasters. So we are very vulnerable, and there is like a very strong gap between how vulnerable and how much is actually protected in terms of insurance. And with that, when we spin it to look at the competitiveness of our businesses, there are multiple indicators that we can look at. And Draghi report and the current commission now is definitely looking more at productivity levels. And everything within the regulatory framework, which I come from a regulatory background. I'm very much in favor of regulation. I mean, there is already correlation between enhanced regulation and trust in the market and better performance of businesses as financial institutions. But we cannot look at productivity only from the prism of productivity and competitiveness, that everything on the green regulatory framework is actually a burden and a cost for our businesses. On the contrary, what we do with this competitive sustainability index at Cambridge, we look at the different sides of what constitute competitiveness, and it includes both the green regulatory side, but also productivity of businesses, and something that was mentioned again also yesterday, governance and stability. So this is also a very key indicator, especially when we talk about foreign direct investments and benefiting from some of the available European level funds and foreign investments as well. So with that, I want to really turn to the opportunity and the benefits side as well. I very often see our region in Europe. It is incomparable, but what we do here at COP, for instance, is really to reconcile the developed and the developing world, the vulnerable and those who need to chip in more in terms of the financial contributions. And I very much think that within Europe we have like a similar dynamic, and if we manage to solve that divide between the laggards in Central and Eastern Europe, I do believe that there will be a lot of opportunities. But just to give you an example, some countries already in the region, like Poland and the Czech Republic, for instance, are already benefiting quite significantly. So within the European market and within the global value chain, the good position of our region altogether, the countries in the region, the interconnectedness of the region definitely opens a lot of opportunities, especially in terms of industry. So Poland is one of those examples that has historically been a little bit more on the opposition side when it comes to green policies, but in fact Poland is currently very much benefiting from, for instance, the heat pump manufacturing. There are a lot of foreign direct investments from Japan, from Daikin, for instance. They're establishing their first heat pump manufacturing capacities in Poland precisely. So Poland is becoming this hub for clean tech and is attracting a lot of investments outside of Europe despite all the regulation, despite all the additional administrative burden. So this is just to show that when we embrace and not necessarily look at all the green transition as an additional cost, additional burden, something that is like a top-down narrative and regulation from Europe, from Brussels, then we can in fact start seeing already what are some of the benefits in terms of clean tech, in terms of interconnectedness for the energy sector as well. With that, I'll finish on that note that in our index we do rank the different member states, and the last ranking was done in 2022. Bulgaria is the least performing, so it's the the bottom one. We are expecting the updated index in December. I think Romania is beating us this time in the race to the bottom, but I definitely want to end on this note. Let's not aim for race to the bottom, but on the contrary, try to aim to have this, to foster this environment a little bit of more understanding what are the benefits and what are the opportunities that come with it, not only to look at it from a burden perspective.
Surely, yeah. I always feel concerned when I hear about such rankings, given the fact that the Central and Eastern European economies are really not the laggards, but the leaders when it comes to growth. I mean, these are the faster growing. Okay, I mean, for that, there could be many reasons which should be, you know, taken into consideration when we bring this to the discussion. But we are faster growing economies and we are not so well connected economies. This is something where, as you mentioned, there is a lot of potential. But these are also economies which have, particularly Bulgaria, massively reduced, without even planning it, their emissions vis-a-vis the reference year. I mean, Bulgaria has basically halved, even more than halved, its carbon emissions given the 1990 baseline. And that's happened in a period when industry was very rapidly modernized, and we see that happening in Romania, we see that happening in Poland. Of course, size matters. But coming back to the topic of supply and demand side of climate finance, and you also mentioned, you know, the cross-border projects. Are we big enough as individual economies to attract foreign investment, but not only foreign investment, our own institutional investors, into large enough sizable projects with long-term impact on the competitiveness of the economy on one side, but on the other side contributing to the net zero transition and the net zero competitiveness of the near future, I would like to say.
Bulgaria, yes, is comparatively smaller to other countries in Europe, but I do think that the access to the market, to the European market, is definitely one of the opportunities that foreign investors also see in the region. So it's not only the interconnectedness of the region. So I would say that the first step is absolutely stability and trust in the market and trust in the governance, and then we can start looking at the market dynamic. I do agree that jointly we are much bigger. This is why we already start seeing initiatives such as the 3 Cs initiatives, looking to, you know, work with, invest in, and collaborate on a larger scale in the region rather than in the individual countries alone. So there is definitely a lot to be desired. There is a lot more to be done in terms of combining the potential of the region and the countries in the region, but it has to definitely first start with some stability and trust in the governance mechanism. And this, for instance, is one of the key things that I think need to happen in Bulgaria, for instance, to have really the direction of travel, clear direction of travel, indication for both the businesses and to investors. Well, we will be in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years, how our energy sector would look like. So this is definitely something that I think will have more weight. Otherwise, I do see some appetite in the market itself.
Well, thank you. I would like to, you know, build on the competitiveness topic of this discussion. And well, next to me is a very competitive business leader of a very, very competitive business. Dimitri, you're the first corporate leader of a mining company who awarded the Sustainable Development Goals Pioneer Award of the Global Pact. I mean, that's not something which is expected, you know, a mining company, you know, becoming a leader in the sustainability development goals. How does that happen? You know, what is the competitive edge which ArcelorMittal obviously is applying to be visible from this perspective as well, not only as a very important mining company in the region.
Yeah, I'm going to use this. Yeah. So, hi everyone. So, we got awarded this prestigious award, Sustainable Development Pioneer Award, after many years of investments into technologies that made us competitive and digitally transformed completely. You know, when you hear a mining company, I think that the public is not very well informed that contemporary mining companies and modern mining companies, they have nothing to do with the image of a dirty mining company and the miner with the shovel, you know, digging out gravel and dirt, you know. So the way it happened is that our company started investing even before it was privatized 30 years ago, more than $1 billion into the most modern technologies that allowed us to transform completely the company and be one of the two companies in the world that produce copper at an impossibly low copper grade of 0.27%. So this is an example of how, in spite of all the, let's say, challenges of the time, let's not forget that we operate in Eastern Europe. Bulgaria itself was transforming itself. And in Europe, where all industry and especially the mining industry is heavily regulated, we managed to do business in a difficult environment and at a very low copper grade. How it happened and why it is important to emphasize on sustainability. Sustainability means that you have a plan in a very complex environment and you follow it it's very simple, for 30 years, you know. So. And you work hard for 30 years.
Simple to you. I mean, it doesn't
well,
sound that simple from outside.
Well, it's simple because even the most difficult task, even the most difficult strategy and goal is achieved easily if you start on time. And this is actually the motto of our company. To start first means to start on time. And we started 30, 40 years ago, and we were working hard, and we invested quite a lot, and also we did not use. How should I say? We used on the average half of our profits were reinvested into our company, into Bulgaria, and that's how it happens, you know, for 30 years, and we achieved so much, and we intend to follow this strategy for the next many years, because lowering the copper grade and reinvestments into the company makes it possible to turn what previously has been thrown out to the waste dumps into copper, and copper, as you know, is in the heart of the green transformation. You know, copper is into everything, into mobile phones, into copper wiring, into wind turbines, into air conditioning units. So without copper, there could be no progress, and that's what maybe the public is unaware of. You know, we have to make the public more aware that, especially some NGOs that are misusing the public opinion and making policymakers and politicians extreme in terms of regulations and in terms of stopping some projects. That there must be a balance. You know, you can't just stop all mining in Europe, because then we have to all go back to bicycles and even our cars. We should leave our cars, and we should stop the heating plants, and we should live on trees. You know, but that's not how the way it should be done. There should be a balance between development and innovation, and keeping the environment completely clean. And speaking about keeping the environment clean and having clean technologies, our mine has almost zero emissions. You know, we have invested heavily. One of our programs is sustainable technologies to not pollute the environment. You know, we have almost zero emissions, you know, compared to many other industries. So it is possible to have a mine that is not polluting. Actually, one of the examples is we have a ecological agriculture near the mine, and on one of our waste dumps we have started producing lavender oil, you know. So it's done on an operating, actually for the first time in the world, on an operating waste dump slope. And I can, you know, in the interest of time, I have to stop, you know, and I can tell you a lot of projects that we've done for the first time in the world, actually, which is also good for Bulgaria, because it shows that Bulgaria, as a small economy, and because Bulgarians, we always complain, oh, we're a small economy, nobody invests, nobody comes to invest, you know, we don't have the size and the depth of other economies, but it's not true, you know. In Bulgaria, in a small town of Bulgaria, in small Bulgaria, we in our company, and I see many other companies like that, we've done projects that are at a world level, at the top world level, and it is possible in spite of the bureaucracies, in spite of the slight political instability in Bulgaria that we have now, in spite of operating in Europe that is lagging behind America and China in terms of innovation. We have done amazing things in Bulgaria. It is possible, and it's happening more and more.
Surely. I mean, you mentioned two things which make me very enthused to continue this discussion. On one side, companies like Azerbaijan going way beyond what the regulation requires, and it's not only Azerbaijan doing that. Being the first in the world in certain, you know, projects and aspects and innovation, it's certainly going beyond what the regulation or the, you know, wider legislative framework requires you to do. It would be quite interesting to hear what is motivating this, you know, drive to go beyond what the regulation requires. But on the other side, the balance. I mean, you mentioned the regulation has gone very much now into the disclosure and you know, applying the taxonomy. How is the formal side of the regulatory impact on the business development, balancing with the drive of the entrepreneurship and the corporate culture to go beyond what is required by the regulation and you know, make a breakthrough?
Okay, so what I've learned from my father, because he was the source of this corporate strategy of sustainable development in Azerbaijan 34 years ago, is that you have to see the tendency, you have to see the tendencies, you have to see where the world is going, you know, before you make your decisions. And like I said, if you see where the world is going, it is going to carbon neutral and to a more green economy. If you start investing ahead of the game, ahead of the regulations that are coming inevitably, then you're prepared, you know. So the way we've done it is like I said, we investing on the average minimum 50% of our profits into the most modern technologies, so transferring them from anywhere around the world in the sphere of mining, you know, they're implemented. The other thing is like I said, we foresee that in Europe regulations are getting tougher, and I think since 2 years ago the ESG reporting standards are compulsory. I think Europe is a pioneer in this respect also. So we're well prepared. We started preparing 10 years ago for that, you know. So and it's when you start preparing 10 years ago, it's not difficult for you, and it's easy. And being ahead of the game means investments, means listening to the people in your community where you operate, helping the community in all sorts possible. And there is a long list of things that we've done for the community. I'm not gonna emphasize on that, but we somehow help the regional government and the government of Bulgaria develop the sectors that the sector or the spheres of society that need more attention, that need more investments on government level, and these are, we all know, culture, education, healthcare. We decided that we instead of complaining that the government is not doing something, or the mayor, or I don't know, the United Nations, you know, we started investing heavily into these four aspects that develop society in Bulgaria, in the region where we operate. And actually, ironically, and I think there is a Harvard Business Review study on that among the Fortune 500 companies, investing into the regions, into the success of the regions where you operate, and in reinvestment in your own company at a higher level, more than 50% of your profits, helps you in the long run to also be financially better off. You know, it's ironic because it's not ironic. It's counterintuitive, but it's happening because when society around you and the most important resource for the success of any company, which is the human resource, is happy and successful, then you have better access to such a resource. Then our workers and employees are happier. Then we have 100% retention rate. We have 200 job applications all the time. You know, we have no problem with that. And it's like a snowball effect, and it multiplies the economical and social development of the whole region. And like I said, also our example is contagious, and I see more and more companies doing that in Bulgaria. And yeah, all in all, I'm an optimist for the future of Bulgaria, in spite of all the slight problems that we may have in terms of governance and government and you know. But like I said, if people understand that, instead of complaining, you know, especially people that are large companies, they start investing now. They start seeing the future and investing at the right levels of society that help society develop, not only economically but socially, in terms of healthcare and education. Then the effects are amazing, enormous.
Well, thank you. I mean, I'm thrilled. I mean, in the words of Erasmus, I'm an optimist because I'm a realist. And another business leader like you, some years ago, Henry Ford, you know, left us the proverb, the proverbial quotation that if you think you can or you think you cannot, you're always right. So it's only with this attitude, but indeed you say something which we would like to continue discussing in the second part of our panel, and it is that the economy is for the people. People are not for the economy. When you do what's good for the people, for the society, and for the environment, it's inevitably good for the economic development and financial prosperity of those who are doing it, and particularly, you know, for their own economic sustainability, but their sustainability in a wider sense. Just a couple of final words on this. I mean, I also want to pay tribute and respect to Professor Tsotsokov, your father, who left us tremendous legacy and a personal example of contributing to society in a way in which society grows and then everything flourishes around that. What are the principles of social responsibility and social motivation which, you know, corporate leaders and large corporations like Azerbaijan need to take into the 21st century and be exemplary in their countries, in the region, but also beyond?
Oh, it sounds like a huge legacy, you know, and a heavy legacy. But like I said, on one hand, you have to be able to foresee the future, and we all know where the future goes, you know, in terms of carbon neutral, in terms of better cooperation, faster cooperation, being fast experimentation, pivoting. On one hand, you have to see that. On the other hand, you have to rely on good old ethical and moral principles. So the leaders of the future and especially our political leaders, they have to be a bit more moral, a bit more ethical, and a bit more humble. And that's I think the most important lesson towards future leaders. On one hand, on the other hand, they have to be a bit more adaptable, a bit quicker to change, because especially in Europe, because the world is faster and faster, and China and America are much faster in terms of quick experimentation, quick adaptation. So I think the world is balanced. We have to be balanced. On one hand, to be stable and predictable, and adhering to good old moral virtues and ethical values. On the other hand, we have to be adaptable, and we have to strive every day to foresee and to strive every day to make the world a better place. You know, that's what I can say.
Well, thank you so much. I'll take this into my next question to Dr. Yao Chen. But before that, I would like you to join me in thanking our panelists. We'll continue with the second part of our panel now. So, Dimitar Tsonkov, Alexandra-Maria Bocse, and Tsvetelina Kuzmanova, thank you so much for being this morning with us and, you know, warming us up into a very topical discussion for the day. May I invite now Barbara Kauffmann to the seats in front, together with Julian Gikov and Gennady Kondarev, I see sitting there. So please join us for the second part of the panel. Dr. Yao Chen, Dimitar mentioned balance and adaptability in his closing remarks. You have a helicopter view and a very good comparative perspective of the region, you know, how businesses, but also how regulatory frameworks are developing and catching up. What are the barriers or also the challenges which, if we collectively overcome in the near future and somehow come up with, you know, standards which are good for business, good for the countries and good for the region, we can accelerate our pragmatic approach to achieving better competitiveness in a greener and more carbon neutral economy.
Thank you very much.
I should think so. I mean,
now, yeah. Better, perfect. Okay, hello everyone, and thank you for having me. It's really a pleasure and an honor. So we heard already a lot about governance, trust into markets, stability, and so on and so forth. So I would like to, not only because I'm a lawyer by nature, build on that, right? So, I mean, we are representing a lot of investors and international players, right? And the first question they're asking us is how stable is the market? How is the legal environment? Is it close to our, so to say, world? Is it investable for me? What are the country-specific risks in this, so to say, investment? So to answer this question or to solve this problem, you need a stable regulation, right? A future-fit regulation. And what we often see is that not only in this region we are lacking behind when it comes to proper regulation, although we have a European Union who is really pioneering the regulatory, so to say, environment, we are not using that properly. We have a mishmash of regulations. They are not talking to each other. Even worse, they are blocking sometimes transition. They are blocking investments. I give you an example. If an investor goes into a CEE country and it can't so to say, foresee that its licenses for a renewable power plant will not be cancelled because of a political change, then the investor doesn't go there. So this happened to come to our clients, right? And you lose this investor forever. So stability, enforceability of laws, right, predictability is very, very crucial, and the rule of law is very, very important there. And I love the word recycling in this context. So we can learn from each other. We know we have best practices. I learned already how great visionaries are there operating in this market, right, by the first, so to say, panel. So listening to them, listening to their needs, inviting businesses, not seeing them as a threat, so to say, to development, but inviting them, telling them what specifically do you need in order to invest more into this country, to listen to them and translate that, of course, and balance it off with, so to say, local needs. I think that would be a good way going forward, because the easy part is sometimes having a good idea or a good investment idea. But I think we will talk about bankability a bit later, right, even more. But making it investable, and I was sitting at the risk committee of a bank for 8 years, right, is even more important. So I think looking at the region, we are acting as, so to say, individuals rather than acting collectively. And I truly believe into the power of CEE, and also adding to that maybe Turkey makes it even more powerful. So I think we can do there much more knowledge sharing, capacity sharing, right? Even, so to say, aligning our treaties and investment, so to say, strategies and investment development strategies could be really a good way going forward. But nothing of that can happen if you don't have a proper legal system, which is working, right? Not just theoretically, but practically. I often see new regulations coming, and then I think, how should this work in practice? And then, if you have such type of regulations, you need a very good judicial system. So you need courts who step up, which we see more and more, right? So we see more and more very impactful decisions taken by courts because of the lack of regulation. So, but if you don't have both, an investor will rather go to another country, right, especially for long-term investments, where maybe the margins are not that high, but the predictability is there, rather than going into very, very, so to say, developing and great markets, and CEE is definitely one of those.
So it's more about effective and predictable regulatory framework rather than more regulation or less regulation.
Absolutely. Regulations talking to each other. I'll give you an example. If there is, so to say, we often, when we think of regulation, we first think about Ministry of Environment or environmental, so to say, as being the natural habitat for regulations when it comes on green transition, which is not true. So we need a countrywide, right, refresh and reform look for greener, so to say, transitioning enabling regulations. I have a client who invested, I will not mention the country, but who tried to invest in a country where they really wanted to also, it was the food and goods sector, where they really wanted to, so to say, transform also agriculture. They couldn't do it because of regulation, right? Because there are some old-fashioned views on how, so to say, regulations were adapted, and they don't change forever. So what was fit for purpose, I don't know, 40 years ago, is not fit for purpose anymore because technology is different. Our challenges are different. Climate change is changing everything, right? Just to give you an example, in Turkey, I can proudly say, is a champion on renewable energy. I mean, we are, I think, within Europe, ranked 5th in the capacity, installed renewable capacity. We have other problems, but that's something we really, so to say, tackled early on. So, but what we need to think about is that all the sun and wind and renewable energy projects we did, with the climate changing so drastically, changes, of course, the whole business side of these projects, right? And then it affects your grid because renewables are often unstable, right? And so on and so forth. So we need to develop even further. So what do I try to say with that? It is a continuous development. You can't say, oh, now I have a regulation, perfect, it's there. So let's go with that. No, you need to continuously look at it. Look how this regulation talks to another regulation in a different sector, right? Is it blocking that or not? It was very interesting. I did once a keynote for the United Nations, and I talked about deregulation, and they said, what are you talking about? You are a lawyer. Why are you talking about deregulation and not more regulation? I said, it's both, right? It's a legal reform needed to really remove the regulation which is blocking your transition and then replace it with proper, good or adapted regulation.
Well, thank you. I mean, regulation obviously comes as a very central topic. Next to me is Barbara Kauffmann, who is Director at DG Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion. And Dr. Yao Chen started with a challenge that, you know, we're not using as individual national players the European institutional framework enough. And I'm sure we can always use it more. But you do have this unique view, particularly on the side of employment, in a very particular period for the development of the labor markets. And yesterday we had quite a few times the just transition topic brought into the discussion, the importance of getting everyone on board in order to make this sustainable transition sustainable itself. are we missing something, or we're just, you know, going in different gears because we had a different level of development of our social frameworks on one side, but labor markets as well?
First of all, good morning to everybody. I'm really happy to be here in the Bulgarian pavilion. I have to say I just jumped here from the Just Transition pavilion that we organized together with the ILO. And because indeed Just Transition is for us a key commitment. We think that you cannot have a successful green transition if it's not just. Actually, there will be just no transition if it's not just. And yeah, me too. And so basically, from the beginning, when this still 1 month, maybe we still have this commission, then it will be new commission under President von der Leyen. And so when she set out the proposal for the European Green Deal, which is a pledge and enshrined in law climate neutrality by 2050 and CO2 reduction of 55% by 2030. Then from the beginning was also clear we want to have a just transition. And you're saying, I mean, don't we have enough of it? Well, we're really trying hard. And when you mentioned, for instance, the complex but useful regulatory framework of the Commission, then indeed we had, after the Green Deal was launched, 2 Fit for 55 packages and, I mean, over 20 pieces of legislation. And one of them was actually a Council recommendation adopted by unanimity of all the 27 member states and then addressed to each individual member state to ensure that the green transition is just. And this Council recommendation asks each member state to devise a comprehensive set, but interlinked set of policy packages to make sure that the green transition is just. Now, we are reviewing, we are monitoring because there are different aspects. There's the skills, there is the employment, there's the taxation, there's social protection, there is the whole of society approach involving social partners using the funds that are there. And I have to say, we are not yet quite there when it comes to the comprehensiveness. Because there are pieces here and there, but this strategic approach at the national level, also at the top of each state, to say let's look at everything together, is not yet really there. Since we are here talking about this particular region, let me also say that in Europe in particular, and that region specifically, really faces enormous challenges in the sense that temperature is rising faster in Europe. These countries are particularly affected. We will have issues of, more and more heat stress, losing livelihoods because certain things cannot be done anymore. And it's a region that also still is catching up with the rest of Europe. While we have seen great strides in per capita increases, even on the social front a bit, there are still more ways to go. So you have quite a few vulnerable people. And when we're talking about just transition, we're talking about, do people lose the jobs? Yes, in the coal regions, many may lose the jobs. So do we find the ways to have just transition strategies to find alternatives? Economically and in terms of skilling is a key thing. And there also the challenge in the region is that actually, compared to some other parts of Europe, the indicators still a bit down when it comes to skilling activities, skills levels. So I think all these things, and another thing, social dialogue. In EU in general, we have a tradition of social dialogue, less so in this region.
I would like to pick on the social dialogue because it came up a few times yesterday, but it becomes clearly understood now that unless you get on board all parties in a dialogue, and it is probably not only about green transition or net zero competitiveness, but generally about addressing key societal challenges, it's a little bit like with just transition or just no transition. How can we do that? How can we get together institutions, European institutions, national institutions, business leaders, like we're doing it today, lawyers? Unfortunately, you cannot go without them anywhere, and particularly in the very complex and developing world of dynamically changing regulation. By the way, I always refer to CMS when it comes to regulatory comparisons. You do brilliant publications vis-a-vis energy, particularly. But NGOs, institutes, we have representatives of think tanks as well here. How can we make this dialogue indeed interesting enough so all social partners get on board?
So at the EU level, I mean, I would say there are different levels here. At the EU level, we have a number of frameworks. For instance, even obligations that when we put forward legislation on certain things, we have to have a two-stage social partner consultation, 2 rounds of consultations. We also have, I used to be responsible for social dialogue in my DG. We are organizing like 43 sectoral dialogues. They meet for different branches, and they also discuss things like digital transition and the green transition and how do we do best. So there are also of discussions going on at a EU level, the tripartite social summit and so on and so on. But it's very important because after all, the policies, in the end, the concrete policies are made at the member state level, and social partners are closest to the action and closest to the restructuring. So we are also trying to support through capacity building, even inviting member states to use social fund to support the social partners financially and to encourage them to involve social partners. Just a recent example, they are now in the new economic governance, 4-year strategies that member states should put forward, fiscal and structural. And member states are invited to consult social partners before they put forward the strategy. Now we're hearing, social partners don't feel so comfortable that they're actually being consulted, and therefore there has to be a bit of a push from our side. But in the end, it is up to member states to do their thing and consult social partners, and I'm sure they will have better strategies if from the beginning they integrate the social partners. So this is some element. Another element is we have the so-called, I'm coordinating that on the employment skills and poverty reduction front, the so-called European semester, where every year we analyze the situation of member states in economic and employment policies, and then we issue council recommendations to these member states. So if a member state does really poorly on social dialogue, we are issuing a recommendation, please improve your social dialogue. Now, coming closer to the green transition, in the green transition, we have set up, for instance, under the skills agenda, the Pact for Skills. There are all sorts of partnerships between training providers, social partners, governments, in order to identify in various sectors training needs, let's say for batteries or for hydrogen or whatever, so that things become more concrete. Because one thing is please consult, the other thing is let's see, we have this mega challenge, we have labor shortages in Europe, we are going to lose 36 million by 2050, 1 million every year, and let's see how we take up this, this green challenge, and where do we need to trade, how many, who provides the money, who provides the training. And this is also with the involvement of social partners.
I would like to take this, Go
just
ahead.
If you allow me
please,
a very, very quick high-level comment, because what you both mentioned was very, very interesting, and I also do agree this common dialogue is very much needed, but probably one ingredient to add to how people more intensively sit together and try all these green topics is if and when we have a very clear result-oriented goal for these discussions. Okay. Is it okay? Is it okay? Okay. The more, my opinion is, the more tangible the discussion is, and the more visible the potential results of those discussions would be, the higher also the social awareness that you mentioned about, the more visibility that provides, and especially in topics which are less abstractive, like regulations and various incentives and so on, but rather what exactly our discussion results into, and whether it's a high-speed electrified train or some kind of infrastructure. Let's have these goals on the table, so we basically promote more awareness and to the people. But and final comment on a very high level, quick one on what Yelchin said previously in terms of the investment, the investors and how they see our region. I think important point is to be mindful that investors are much more sophisticated throughout the past 10 years than they used to be, the ones that come to our CEE region, and they can easily distinguish short-lived effects from governmental policies from something that's long-lived and sustainable, and that very much determines their investment appetite towards the region, towards a particular country. And we see some countries in CEE don't really have don't seem to have a final destination as to where they want to be in terms of net zero or economic impacts after the transition is done, where they want to be. And once and ideally you should have that, and try to, once you have the final vision, reverse engineer kind of the various stages, so you get to promoting, to boosting economy, to net zero and all these elements. But while doing this, you're sending the right signals to the investors, and you're not foregoing their money inflow at that point. So sorry to jump in here.
Brilliant intervention, Julian. You're a financier. You've been with Raiffeisen International for quite a few years, and you've seen that throughout the region. What you just mentioned, I link very much also to a topic which came up yesterday about the supply and the demand side of projects, which should be contributing to the green competitiveness and net zero competitiveness. How can setting strategic goals at national level and beyond, at European level, but particularly bringing it down to the necessities of good governance on one side, but national strategic goals and predictability of the development of regulatory and any other institutional framework, contribute to improving the demand side for green finance? Well, yesterday we heard a lot that there is more and more faster growing supply of finance for green tech, for green technologies, for green transition as well. But are there enough good projects which can benefit?
Well, it's to me. Yeah, thanks. I would say there are obviously lots of efforts towards this direction, but the efforts seem to be overall kind of dispersed as an outside view, if we're talking about foreign investors. And if you look at the CEE, for example, especially the CMS view is always valuable. The CEE countries are definitely not as homogeneous in terms of applying the green agenda policies as mostly Western European ones, and this sets a very different, how to say, investment profile of each of those countries. Just even if we take very recent examples as we speak, Bulgaria is introducing batteries subsidies over a tender for storage next week. On the other extreme, the Czech Republic, just last week, and you probably know that very well, they introduced extremely severe adverse measures as to cutting down feed-in tariffs of RES, which has pretty much wipes out RES producers' entire business model. Does this send a homogeneous or signal to investors that it's a predictable place to invest in? Probably not. At the same time, so it really differs across countries. For example, Romania is introducing the CFD schemes to support offtake of electricity of renewable players.
Dr. Yelchin spoke about making the countries investable, but also the projects investable. What is the shortest way from the perspective of a banker like you?
The shortest way, I think, is to combine...
And the greenest.
Well, I think it's predictability and very consistent vision with clear path and milestones to where we want to be, and be able to show this in a very tangible, proper way to investors. If I can, answer this in a very high-level manner.
So that brings us back to the topic of, setting strategic goals, knowing where you want to be one day. Like Dmitry Tsatsarkov gave us a brilliant example of a very successful company who achieved it that way, by doing it predictably for many, many years. And before I come back to Julian, I want to throw the ball to Gennady now. Gennady Kondarev is Senior Associate for Central and Eastern Europe with E3G. Gennady, you say often that, there is no U-turn in the green transition. This process is irreversible. At the same time, it goes with new leap in industrial modernization throughout the world, but particularly relevant to improving the competitiveness of the converging economies in our region. How do you compare the players in this rapidly modernizing industrial region of Europe, and are there sectors which are pioneers?
Thanks, Iliya. I'm part of a climate policy think tank which is focused on achieving safe climate future. And with the colleagues with whom we try to monitor the developments around Central and Eastern Europe, and I'll continue on a more positive note, we try to sort of define the region as glass half full. So usually on the surface things may look a little bit desperate, but to be honest, a lot is going on around Central and Eastern Europe, and there are a lot of positive developments that we can praise and account for. For example, we've seen in the last couple of years a rapid ramp up of the renewable energy ambition in the power sector. So the first sector that was sort of a major target for the decarbonization, because it was also one of the main emitters and quite centralized. And we see, for example, countries like Poland, like Romania, like Bulgaria. Poland and Bulgaria were barely considering 30% in the power mix to be the renewables in 2030. Now go as far as 56%. And for Poland, we definitely know they can do more. For a country like Bulgaria, this means almost complete decarbonized sector by 2030. If we are able to achieve that, combined with the existing nuclear power, this leads to a decarbonization of the power sector beyond 90%. And that's quite a thing, and it's something we can really brag about.
So the glass is not only half full, but it is filling up quickly.
It is filling up quickly, and again, when it comes to political ambition, we see that very often even countries are holding back a little bit on what they promise, and it's often what we observe in Central and Eastern Europe. They ultimately become overachievers. Now, something was tackled by Alexandra in the previous part of the panel, the added value of renewables that we can retain within our countries. This is a huge opportunity that we really need to snap.
What about skills? I mean, Barbara talked a lot about, the skill aspect of...
Let me get there. But when it comes to retaining renewable energy added value, Poland, for example, is already quite advanced. They're able in wind projects to retain 50-60% of the added value of those renewable energy projects. In countries further east and further south, like in Romania, that has unlocked already its wind energy market, we see that only about 20% of the added value is retained there. Luckily for Romania, countries like Bulgaria, Slovakia and Hungary has now locked their market for wind energy developments, which is also a huge opportunity for a country like Romania to develop their wind energy industry. And further on that, the vision that has to be built on the idea of interconnectedness of the use of energy. So energy system integration approach is something that will prevent the patchwork in targets at the moment, will help us model a little bit better the energy systems, because we are entering a world where base load is no longer there, and we have a rapid shift in the paradigm how we manage and balance our energy systems. Energy system integration approach also helps us interconnect the power targets with two other sub-targets that have been for a long time in the shadow of this target. So heating and cooling, which is a huge opportunity, especially with the electrification, to contribute even better to the balancing also of the power sector, and transport. And there we also see a rapid increase of targets. Unfortunately, in heating and cooling, countries didn't pay that much attention in the current revamp of the national energy and climate plans.
How important is sustainable finance and the provision of sustainable finance in order to achieve, the accelerated growth in the direction you speak?
Key sector, and I hope I'll get support from the practitioners in the field, because through finance, if you need to ask for funding or for insurance, and you have to go through a number of criteria like taxonomy, reporting under the corporate social responsibility directive, all these kind of things create level playing field for the companies. And if they need to go for funding, this is really the quickest way to introduce change in the entire energy system. I also want to praise a little bit the region for something else that was unthinkable just 5 years ago. Central and Eastern Europe is rapidly exiting coal. So 5 years ago, nobody would have believed that by 2030 we are going to be more or less a coal-free region. We were the main, some of the main polluters when it comes and users of coal energy. And now we see that, I mentioned the target of Poland, 56% of renewables. This is a country that just until recently was using 70% of coal in the energy mix. Greece is going beyond 80%. And it was a country that just 10-15 years ago was at 60% of use of lignite in their power sector. So those are huge leaps ahead that are really a good reason to feel proud about the achievements of the region. We're not yet there, but we are going there with a steady step.
Final words.
Okay, final word. The toughest part that we can try to work on and change, of course, is our mentality. And that's something that is holding us back a little bit. But we'll have a lot of opportunities in the coming year. I would say the planets are aligned once in a decade for Central and Eastern Europe, because we do have the revamp of the industrial policy of the European Union, a huge chance to consider how we are going to further modernize our industries, and the place we are going to ask and the role we are going to ask to play within the European Union. We are going to have Poland hold presidency next year. We're currently under the Hungarian presidency of the EU Council, also an opportunity. Number of key portfolios are now standing with commissioners from Central and Eastern Europe, and yet they are commissioners for all of the EU. but they also come from this region, and this means that they're not going to miss the perspective when policies are further developed and implemented. Speaking of Roxana Minzatu from Romania, that will be responsible for the skills development. Speaking of Ekaterina Zakharieva, will be responsible on startups and innovation, because much of the industry in the region is headquartered from outside. So this is, when targets are good, you know, this industry is going to move ahead. But when the region wants to be in the driving seat, developing our people and developing the skills and the entrepreneurial feeling instilled in the people, so that we can do startups, we can develop new business models, this is when ultimately we're going to turn behind the driving seat.
Thank you very much, Gennady. Well, I like what you said about changing the mentality, but also from the perspective that often we do better than we think, and we can certainly do more if we believe we can do more. And you mentioned the very key and strategic portfolios some of our commissioners. We heard from Commissioner Ivanova yesterday, future Commissioner Zakharieva, who have a responsibility you mentioned, which is at the very core, at the very center of what Mario Draghi put as a stress in his report in order to achieve competitiveness, not just for our region, but for Europe as a whole. We will hear more about this, particularly on the energy side, later on today, and we will have the honor to welcome President Radev together with Prime Minister Mitsotakis in a few minutes here in this room. With this, I would like to invite you to join me in thanking our brilliant panelists for this very, very intensive morning.